Hi Guava Bees, and welcome to another episode of the Dear Guava Bean podcast. Remember, submit your questions in the sandbox or on the website and we could be answering yours in the next episode. I'm Francesca and with me is Claire.
Hello.
And today's question is from Franki, who asks, Dear Guava Bean, I recently took the plunge into the world of freelancing. My previous job was very fast-paced and I achieved a lot in a day. I thought it would be able to transfer that level of productivity quite easily when working for myself, but I've noticed that I'm struggling to focus, and before I know it, the day's done and I've only achieved 1/10 of the tasks I could have done. My question is, how can I maintain focus and increase my productivity when working from home? This is a pretty tough one, but I think it's again something that a lot of freelancers struggle with. What are your first thoughts, Claire? Because I know that you are all about being productive, making the most of your day as a freelancer.
Yes, this is possibly one of my favorite topics in the world. I don't know why, but I love the whole subject of time management, productivity, focus. For me, it's a huge part of my work because it helps me do everything that I do. And so I love it. I've been studying this topic for years and years, ever since, I guess, college, when I had to balance. I was doing an accelerated program and I was working at the same time. So I was like juggling a million things. I had to learn how to be super, super, super effective with my time. And so, yes, I have a lot of tips, a lot of ideas and things that I could say, but I don't want to give too many tips and hacks because I know that can easily get overwhelming. And especially when you're new to the world of freelancing and working for yourself, to throw someone into the deep end and give them like, you should do this and that and the other, it takes a lot of time to build up these skills. Took me years to learn how to be productive and how to manage my time well. And so the first thing I would say is that when we talk about productivity and focus, we're talking about two main skills here. Productivity, in my opinion, is a byproduct of good time management. If you manage your time well and if you plan well, then you'll be able to do a lot in that time. And that gives you a lot of productivity. Focus is a side effect of good self-discipline because the stuff that makes you unfocus is like the distractions, the interruptions, the bad habits, the things, the procrastination. It takes a lot of self-discipline to pull yourself away from that, to recognize when you're slipping and to get yourself back on track. And so these two skills, time management and self-discipline, are two of the toughest skills I think anybody can learn, not just freelancers. I know people in their 30s, 40s, 50s who are still learning how to manage their time, how to be self-disciplined. I don't think anybody ever gets to this point where they're like, I'm done. I know how to manage everything perfectly. I never have bad days. That doesn't happen. And so the first thing I would just say to this is that you got to understand when you're just starting out as a freelancer, just learning how to manage your time, you're starting at level 1. You're a white belt when it comes to time management. And you got to learn how to make your way through those levels because there's levels to everything. And if you're struggling to focus now, that just means you're at a certain level and you want to get to the next level. What do you think about that, Francesca? You've worked at home a long time. How long did it take you to finally figure this out? And what level do you feel like you're at now?
That's such a good question. I always say, I've been doing this ages, but it really still surprises me. I've been doing it nearly a decade, and it did take me probably a good 3 years probably before I realized that I was wasting a lot of time and being unproductive. Because I think from going from like a 9-to-5 job, which is what I did before I was a freelancer, it's because you're not in charge of your own workload in a way. You have a boss kind of throwing work at you and you just do it. There's a difference between being busy and being productive. And I think that's what the transition was for me. It was going from just being busy all the time. Yeah, I'm filling my day with loads of stuff, but is it actually moving my business forward? No, probably not. And I love this bit about self-discipline that you mentioned, because it's something I'm very passionate about myself as well. And it's something that I've been exploring a lot recently too, self-discipline, because I feel like as a freelancer, and certainly anybody really who's doing anything with their life, you know, being alive, being an adult is about self-discipline, I think, just to get things done. But as a freelancer, we can definitely apply it to being productive and getting those tasks done that maybe we necessarily don't enjoy or we don't want to do. You can't just think that, oh, I just need to work on maybe not having bad days, because everybody has a bad day. Everybody has a day sometimes where you wake up and you're just like, oh, I'm so tired. I can't really be bothered to do anything, you know, or I really have this project coming up and I'm nervous about it and I don't want to tackle it. Sometimes I think we have to just acknowledge that there are going to be some tasks that we have to do that we don't enjoy. And sometimes we are just going to have times where we're not in the best mood. We don't feel like we want to do it. But sometimes it's looking at the bigger picture and looking at those goals and maybe setting yourself some goals as well, which helps you continue to be productive, but also continues to help you strengthen that self-discipline. You know, I don't think it's enough to say that, you know, having willpower or a positive mindset is enough on its own. I think having self-discipline is so important when you want to be productive. I do think that practical skills are very helpful in terms of, you know, things like working out how you want to structure your day, working out what's right for you, but also making sure that you're taking care of yourself actually helps with being productive as well. So making sure that you have enough sleep, that you're hydrated, that you're not constantly being, like you say, Claire, distracted by things, because working from home can be really distracting, especially in the beginning. And maybe you have gone from a fast-paced job like Franki has to working for yourself. It is like opposite ends of the spectrum. It can be very difficult to get used to. So yeah, it's a combination for me for practical skills and also looking after yourself and making sure that you're paying attention to, you know, what makes you feel good. So getting plenty of exercise and sleep and things like that, but also setting yourself boundaries as well, because I think it can be easy as a freelancer to sit at your desk or sit with your laptop or however you're set up and just sit there just for hours and hours and hours because you feel like you have to, but actually you're not really being productive with your time. I think it's important to set yourself actual working hours. This is personally what I struggle with, and I think it's something that every freelancer probably does when your work and your home life are blurred together, is setting yourself a time where you know you should be doing the work that you have on your plate, and then going, okay, I'm going to almost essentially clock off now and then spend time doing the stuff that needs to be doing, like folding laundry or just doing household chores or, you know, meditating or enjoying yourself, all those personal things. I think you need to kind of have this fine line in place between work and personal. I really think that's something that I struggled with, and I know a lot of other people have as well. In terms of what level I think I'm at, it's kind of a good question because I really don't think I'm anywhere near close to like being perfect at doing this. I think that it's something that everyone, like you say, continues to work on. Those goals goalposts are always moving, and I think you have to kind of accept that things evolve, but you never actually get to the finish line without like saying too many cliches on top of each other. I think it's a case of just working on yourself and your productivity and your self-discipline. But those goals are just ever changing. And for me, I think maybe I'm somewhere in the middle. You know, I figured out that I need to, you know, set myself certain goals and figure out how I'm going to plan my day in the way that works for me. But I'm nowhere near close to mastering it yet. And I think it's something that just every freelancer will find in their own time. But it's something you do have to work on. It's not something you can just expect to happen, because it's like anything, isn't it? You have to train your muscle to do something. Well, you have to train your brain to do it too, you know, it's the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I like you said, train your muscle, because I definitely think about self-discipline as a muscle like that. And most people, when you have a 9-to-5 job, your company manages your time. And so you don't have to think about managing your time and what to do in that time because they tell you what to do. But when you start to work for yourself, you realize like, oh, I have so much time and now I have to manage this time. And that's when the whole productivity thing comes into play. So to break down these levels, I guess this is how I see it. I guess I would say, and I'm just making this up, but I would just say that there are probably, in my opinion, 5 levels to learning any new skill. And I'm just basing that off of jiu-jitsu and the belt system where you start as a white belt and then you become a blue belt and a purple belt and a brown belt and eventually a black belt. The white belt level of time management and self-discipline, I would say at this white belt level, at level 1, this is the level where you're learning how to plan. And this is really the critical skill that you're learning at level 1. If you're not even at level 1, like if you see people who haven't even thought about time management yet and they're just winging it. Everybody that's at 0 right now, they're just waking up every day and going, I wonder what I'm going to do today. Let's hope I finish everything that I want to finish. And there's no plan there. There's no schedule. There's no clear written to-do list. And so that's level 0. Once you get to level 1, now you're thinking, okay, I have to put a plan in place so I know what I'm doing every day and it's not just a random roll of the dice. And I think that's the difference between people who are at level 1 and at level 2. At the very first stage of learning time management is planning. And so how I plan every Sunday for the week in advance. I write out in my planner the 3 things that I want to accomplish each day. And I heard this in a podcast somewhere, but for me, the magic number when it comes to planning and just in general is 3. I think too many people give themselves too much work and then they get to the end of the day and they feel discouraged because they haven't finished it all. Even if they've finished half of their stuff, they might have made a list of 10 things and then they're like, oh, I've only finished half of that. And so they feel discouraged and that's going to have a negative impact. If you only give yourself 3 things to do every day and you make those the 3 most important things, then when you finish those 3 things, you can feel really good about what you've done that day. And that builds your confidence, that builds your self-discipline muscles. And you start to realize like, oh, I can do this. I can be productive. It wasn't that I wasn't productive before. I just wasn't planning well. I wasn't giving myself enough time to do the work that I needed to do. And so every week I plan out in advance what I'm going to do for each day of the week. And that way I don't have to guess when I wake up. I know exactly what I'm doing. I have it planned down to the time. So I know when I'm doing it. I know how long it's supposed to take. And that's the first level. Once you get that done and you've got a little planning system that works for you, whether it's on paper or digital, whatever works for you, you've got a little planning system, then I think you're graduated to level 2. And for me, level 2 is learning how to stick to the plan, because it's one thing to make a plan and it's a completely different thing to stick to that plan, especially when you have bad days, especially when you have interruptions and distractions. Sticking to your plan takes a lot of discipline. It takes a lot of consistency. And level 2 is where you really build up those consistency muscles and you learn to not just make plans, but to actually follow through. And so for me, if you're trying to unlock those levels, I would think about like, have I learned to be consistent yet? If not, maybe that's a sign that I'm at level 2 and I need to break through. And in order to break through that level 2, I have to become consistent with my daily plans. And then once you build that consistency muscle and you're being consistent roughly 80% of the time, because nobody's perfect. I don't expect anyone to be consistent all the time. You would have to be a robot. But if you feel like, okay, I'm consistent, I've got my plan, I'm doing the things that I want to do every day, then you can get to level 3. And for me, level 3 is developing a personal routine. Everybody has their own little blueprint for how they like to work and when they like to work and their time schedule of the day. And so this is where you actually start to develop what works for you. Do you work better in the morning? Do you work better in the afternoon? Do you work better at night? Do Do you work better after a coffee? Do you work better after exercise? Like, what time of the day do you do your best work, and how can you customize your schedule so that you're making the most out of the time that you have available? And so level 3 is really where you start to play around and start to create a system that works for you. Instead of just forcing yourself to get up and do your work, you start to develop a system that feels natural and comfortable, and then you don't even have to think about it. For me, that looks like a morning routine. I have a nice little morning routine that I do every morning before I start work. And then when I sit down to work, I have a work routine. And so I always start my work by going through my inbox. I do inbox 0, which is just a little practice of getting to 0 in all your inboxes. So I'll check email, I'll check Slack, check Messenger. I'll just make sure that before I do anything else, all my communication is managed. And then the next thing I do is I go into the Facebook groups because I'm involved in several communities, and that's a big priority for me. And so I take care of that second. And then once that's done, I go into my client work. And so I have a very specific routine that I go through, and it helps me get everything done without having to worry what's coming next. And then once you get that down, level 4 would be optimizing other areas of your life. And you talked about this, like eating healthy, exercising. Once you realize it's all connected and what you eat affects how productive you can be, and exercising in the morning can have a huge impact on your focus for the day. There's lots of other ways that you can optimize your life just by sleeping earlier, eating healthier, exercising more. You start to realize once you get to level 4 that it's all connected, and you can do other things in your life that will have an impact in your productivity. And so for me, that looks like exercising every morning before I start work. I also journal every morning before I start work, and that helps me get into the right frame of mind. So there's little things that you can do once you understand yourself to optimize your productivity in the day. And then I guess the last level, I don't think I'm at the last level. I'm still optimizing the other areas of my life. Right now, my biggest push is health. And so I'm really into eating healthy. I'm really into exercising often. That's where I'm at right now. But I think once you get all of that done, then level 5, from what I've seen, is the level where you start teaching and sharing your knowledge and helping other people who are also interested in this subject. And by teaching and talking about it, you learn so much more about the subject. Like, I'm learning so much more just because I'm talking about this and I'm putting it into a 5-level system that makes sense for me. I think once you get to that level, then you can feel like, okay, I actually have a good grasp on this. But it takes a lot of time. It took me a lot of time to get to this level. And you never get rid of the bad habits that kind of hold you back. Everybody has a few weaknesses and a few bad tendencies that are always going to be there. And so just because you get to level 2 or level 3 or level 4 doesn't mean you are not going to have days when you want to procrastinate, or you're not going to have days where you just feel lazy and don't want to do anything. You're always going to have those weaknesses. Steven Pressfield, in his book, The War of Art, he calls it the resistance. And he talks about the resistance as like being this real thing. When you sit down to work, the resistance is that voice in your head that says, let's just take an extra hour off work. Let's just do this first. Let's just go on social media and see what people are saying. It's that voice in your head that keeps you from being focused and sitting down to do your work. And so it's not only important to understand the different levels and what you need to do to get through each level, but you also need to understand what's holding you back and how you can manage those tendencies when they come up. For me, my biggest weakness, I think I tend to, I have 2 big things. One of my things is sleeping. I love to sleep, so I have a hard time getting up in the morning exactly on time. I love to sleep in. I will make excuses to let myself have an extra hour or 2 of sleep. And I've noticed that whenever I do that, it just throws my day off because now I'm behind on my schedule. I'm catching up. And so it just really puts me in a different frame of mind when I don't wake up on time. And so that's one thing that I'm really working to fix, because I've noticed it's a big weakness of mine that, it doesn't hold me back, but it definitely stops me from being my most productive self. What would you say your weaknesses are?
I have kind of got like a pinball brain where I can't kind of pay attention to something for a long time without getting bored, essentially. And I used to really hate this about myself. But, when you mentioned about having this resistance, this thing in your brain that it just tells you like, oh, go on, you don't have to do that just yet. Just like one more episode of whatever it is you're watching on Netflix or, whatever it is, one extra hour in bed. And I used to really like dislike it about myself and think, oh, I've really got to change it. But I kind of just accept some things about myself. And I think that's a big part of it as well, is just accepting that you are the way you are and doing what you can to kind of maximize your productivity as much as you can for the kind of personality you have, the way that your brain works. For me, it's just getting distracted by things all the time. It's definitely the biggest thing that distracted me when I first started, and it's still something I struggle with now. So for me, getting the biggest thing in my day out of the way first is a big thing for me, because I procrastinate over things if I don't have a solid plan. So I started to just kind of focus on this thing that I really don't want to do, but if I can get it out of the way as early as possible, then the rest of the day seems somewhat easier. So I always try and do that if I can. I also create little goals for myself. So I'm a big fan of having both a paper diary and a Trello board for my work. I like to have both. I have like a to-do list for work and personal, but I also have a daily goal as well. But what I like to do is have some of the same goals every day. And even though I know I have to do them every day, which is just like check emails, check Slack, these kind of things that I do every single day, I still write them down so that they're easy to tick off. And then I feel like I've done more. So for example, another thing that I do so I'm not distracted is I do the dishes every morning. Like if there's a couple things that left over from the night before, I would do that before I do anything else, before I have coffee, before I get dressed, any of this stuff. And I always make sure I do it. It's just part of my routine. And when I've done that, I just feel like, oh, okay, that was easy. Okay, what next? I think if the small, especially if it's something you really struggle with, I think as a new freelancer, it's quite hard. If you know that you are distracted by stuff or you find it difficult to focus, if you break those things you have to do down into like tiny little simple goals that you can tick off, you're going to automatically feel like you're more productive. And I think that's a really good way of building up your productivity. Like you said earlier, you have 3 goals every day. If you had like 20 goals of the same difficulty every day, you would feel so overwhelmed. But I think if you're starting out and productivity is something you struggle with, having small goals, even if they are just the tiniest little thing you can think of, is like make a cup of coffee, brush teeth, brush hair, wash face. I know it sounds silly, but ticking those things off can actually make you feel like you're achieving a lot, and then you can gradually build up to more complex goals or projects, that you're working on. I think it's not enough sometimes to say that you will try to do something. I think it's better to say that you will do something, because I think you put yourself in more of a positive mindset. If you say you're going to try and do something today, like I'm going to try and, get inbox 0 and I'm going to reply to everybody, well, you're automatically going, well, it doesn't matter if I don't. I said I'd try. It doesn't mean that I will. That way you're kind of setting yourself up for not doing something or not trying, as hard as you could. I think if you say that I will do this by this time, say I'm going to clear my emails by 12 p.m, then you're more likely to do it. If you're going to say, I will do it, it's almost like those affirmations, it helps by saying, I will do this. It makes you feel like you're more capable, and I think that also helps you be more productive as well. Trying different methods can be really good. So something that works for one person might not work for someone else. And it doesn't mean that you're rubbish at organizing your day, or you're not very good at being productive or getting things done that you should. It might just mean that the method that you've read about or that your friend doesn't work for you, and it's okay to acknowledge that and try something else. So I write things in my paper diary now, because I know if it's physically on paper that I can tick it off. And it feels like more complete for me. But I do like having a Trello board, as I said. But I used to just rely on Trello and things would get forgotten. And it's not because I'm bad at managing my time. It's just that it didn't work. So I like to have both now. And it's just something that you learn about yourself. And I do think it's good to have discussions with other freelancers, kind of like what we're doing now. I think it's good to get involved in groups and have this discussion with other freelancers to get ideas. If you're not sure what you should do, it can give you ideas on how to manage your time, and something you will find and you'll just be like, this works for me. I'm just going to stick at doing this, and gradually you'll just get better as you practice different areas of your life as well that tie into that. And one more thing I will mention that kind of touches on the things that you said, that I guess that are at level 4 in your level system, when you're trying to look after other areas of your life that also tie into being productive, things like self-care, exercise, sleep, diet, that kind of thing. I would say that self-discipline is way more important than willpower. I don't think willpower is something you can rely on by itself, because willpower isn't always going to be there. So practice on self-discipline and making sure that you can stick to the goals that you have. But don't forget about willpower altogether. I think your willpower tends to be higher or stronger at the beginning of a day as opposed to the end of a day, which is why it feels like you can get that workout in before you start working instead of kind of doing it at the end of the day. It's kind of easier to go, I'll just do it tomorrow. So almost harness the willpower when you can. So if you know that things are going to be more difficult for you at the end of a day, which they do tend to be for a lot of people, not everybody, but most people, do the more difficult things at the beginning of the day when you know you've got the energy and the kind of the strength to do it. And then it'll just feel like the rest of your day is easier, and you'll find that you actually aren't putting as much pressure on yourself to get things done. So I would say that's all I have to add, really. I think that you seem like such a master of productivity, and I feel like I've learned so much from you, because as I say, it's something I'm still definitely getting to grips with all these years later. So thank you, because I've learned a lot today.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely not a master at this. It's just one of my favorite topics. And so I've learned a lot about it. I've read a lot of books. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. I'm always looking at high productive people or like high performance people and trying to see what it is that they do that makes them high performing. And there's some really great books. Like if you want to get deeper into this, Brendon Burchard has a book, I think it's called 6 Habits of High Performing People. I'll put the link in the notes. There's a lot of really, really great stuff. And I love all those tips that you said about doing the hardest thing first. That's a really, really good one. For a while, I had to do that in order to just make sure that I was doing like what I had to do every day. And then I also, I've tried lots of tips. That one that you said of writing down easy tasks, just so you have stuff to tick off on days when I feel like I could get overwhelmed, where there's so much going on and it's going to be like a super intense day. I always try to do that. I try to write out every single thing that I need to do that day in order. And so I just go through the list and tick it off, and it helps me feel a lot more organized on those busy, stressful days. For sure.
I guess there's one more thing I would like to add, actually. When you mention about feeling overwhelmed by stuff, I always try and delay sort of rewarding myself, until I've finished a task. I think that could be a really good way of kind of making sure you get stuff done as well. So I guess that goes back to self-discipline, really, kind of delaying gratification. So I always find Pomodoro actually works really well for me, the Pomodoro technique. And I know tons of people that use this, and it probably is old news now, but it's one worth going over, is that if you kind of set yourself, say 25 minutes or half an hour just to solely focus on the thing that you should be doing, it's okay to reward yourself at the end. It can be really good if it's something you struggle with, like me. My attention is all over the place. And so if I can just teach myself just to delay things just that little bit more each time, I can find I can focus much better, and you get like a little reward at the end. That might be different, for everybody. I always find that's a good way for starting out as well. If you're a new freelancer, it's okay to do stuff like that, rewarding yourself after you've done something particularly difficult or something you didn't want to do, and then it's done, and then you don't have to worry about it, and it strengthens that self-discipline. I think a lot of this is self-discipline, like you mentioned, Claire. It's so important for any area of your life, really, but particularly freelancing. It's definitely a way to increase productivity and focus, really.
Yeah, I like that you mentioned rewarding yourself, because that's something that I do on the days when I just really have no motivation. Some days you just don't feel like it, and you just can't bring yourself to get excited or motivated for work, but you have to do it. On those days, I always try to hack my motivation, or to just trick myself into just doing the work, and rewards is a great way to do it. I do all sorts of stuff. Sometimes I reward myself with like a nice meal that I wanted to eat, or I reward myself with just like watching an episode of my favorite TV show in between tasks. There's tons of simple, easy ways that you can kind of trick yourself into getting work done, even if you don't feel like it. And I don't do this often, but every now and then you have those days where you just don't feel like doing any work, but you still have to be consistent. And so on those days, I would say take advantage of the fact that you work from home and that you have all this freedom to do work however you want, and if working from your bed is going to make you feel better today, then do that. If treating yourself is going to make you more inspired to get your work done, then do that. Do whatever it takes to put yourself in a good mood to work. That is really more important than trying to be as productive as possible. Trying to train yourself to be happy with work is really, really important. And so I always have a few backup tricks that I have in case I ever get one of those bad days and I just don't feel like doing work. I have a list of things that I can do to get myself back on track and to make sure that I finish my work even if I don't feel like it. And so I think everybody should have a list of things that they pull out of the bag whenever you have a bad day and you're like, you know what? I'm just going to give myself a day off. I'm going to just take it easy. I'm still going to do my work, but I'm not going to be so hard on myself today. So that's just one thing I will say. Every now and then, just give yourself a break and allow yourself to have a less than perfect day. As long as you're 80% consistent or 80% productive, I think nobody is going to be perfect 100% of the time, and it's useless to try to be perfect. It's better to enjoy your work and to get through it smoothly and easily with as much enjoyment and enthusiasm as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I think sometimes if you put too much pressure on yourself, you actually kind of impede your progress. So if you feel like you're totally stressed out and you're just overwhelmed, but you're not managing your time and your free time and the stuff that makes you relaxed and happy, I think it's all about a balance, isn't it? If you're not managing that correctly, then you're just going to be totally stressed out and burnt out and frazzled. And we don't want that either, right? You're a freelancer. You're meant to be enjoying your work, enjoying your life more. That's the reason most of us are freelancers. So I think that's a great point. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Remind yourself why you're a freelancer, why you're doing this, and take advantage. You don't have to have a boring workday just because you're overwhelmed or busy.
Exactly, right? There are no rules. You can make your own rules as a freelancer. And I think as long as you have in mind that, you've got to get things done and, there are certain things that, things like making your clients happy and getting your workload, I think those are really important. But also recognizing the things that make you feel good. So, eating well, exercising, all the stuff that we've covered, I think it all plays a big part. But like you say, we're not robots. It's okay to have an off day, and treating yourself gently and kindly as well is also part of that. So just having those moments where you are relaxing and just stepping away is really important, and it's a part of the process too.
Yeah. Okay, so because this is one of my favorite topics and I can't go into enough detail on this, I'm going to include a free printable planner in the notes with this podcast. And it's I'm going to make it in the same layout that I do my weekly planning in. And this might not be the best format for everyone, but it's what works for me. And so if you want to see what that looks like and test it out for yourself, I suggest downloading it, printing it out, and giving it a try for a couple weeks, seeing if you feel more productive using this system. And remember that planning is the first level in time management. So whatever system you use, you have to start with a planning system, and you have to know every day what you're going to do that day and not just wing it. If you wing it, that's just a recipe for disaster.
We hope this episode has helped you figure out what to do next. Now it's your turn, Guava Bees. Have you got a burning question that only Guava Bean can help answer? Submit your question in the sandbox or on the website, and we could be answering yours in the next episode. That's all from us. To all creatives, rebels, and digital nomads, keep working online and living free.
Want to know more about the Freelancer Sandbox? Visit guavabean.com/sandbox to start your free trial now.